very, very involved, but I'll give you the abridged version. The short story is that the communists did not like organized religious activities, and they didn't like including organized Jewish activities. Anything that they felt was a greater devotion than devotion to the Communist Party, they felt as a threat. So if your allegiance to, let's say, God was greater than your allegiance to the Communist Party, that was a problem for the communists. And the communists found a way to eliminate those that they felt were counter-revolutionaries. They were the revolution, and if you were counter-revolutionary, then you were a marked person. And so they went after organized religion. They went after Jewish organization, organized religion, and one of the big targets was the previous Rabbi, because he had created a very vibrant, a very strong network of Jewish infrastructure across the former Soviet Union. And at a certain time, this organization, this movement went underground. If you couldn't gather more than a certain number of people to study Torah, to pray, to do life cycle events, Jewish life cycle events, etc., if you couldn't do that publicly, well, then they found a way to go underground. And the network was always strong and vibrant, and that really irked the communists, especially the Jewish Communist Party. These were Jews who joined the Communist Party, and with such fervor and such, they had to prove that they were such communists that they were going to go after their own, as has been the story throughout Jewish history, to become even more vicious than some of what we would call the regular communists. The Jewish communists were even sometimes more vicious toward their fellow Jews than otherwise. So the previous Rebbe was arrested for counter-revolutionary activities. His original sentence, we know this because his file was released with the fall of the Soviet Union. All the documents were able to be accessed. For decades, they weren't accessed, but they were accessed. Now, we knew this from the oral history, from those that were there and those that told the story. But it was, once the Soviet Union fell, all of these documents came out, and you could see them with the official stamps. He was originally slated to be executed, to be killed. That was commuted to a sentence of 10 years of harsh labor, which was then commuted to 3 years of harsh labor, and which was then commuted to a full release a short time later. So he was imprisoned for a little while, but within a short amount of time, he was released completely. It was a miracle. By all accounts, they wanted him gone. By their own account, they wanted him gone. There was a lot of pressure, international pressure, placed on the Communist Party, on the Soviets to release him. There was, of course, a lot of spiritual pressure also applied through prayer and other acts of devotion, and together everything worked out that he was able to be, that he was released. Now, his full release, he was given the official word of his release on the 12th day of Tammuz, which was yesterday, and he left imprisonment on the 13th day of Tammuz, which is today. So these days are known as the Chag HaGeula, the holiday of redemption of the previous Rabbi, and his ability then and the opportunity for him to continue his activity. You should know that when the Soviet Union fell, so the fact that Judaism was still alive and vibrant in the Soviet Union and was able to reignite is really essentially due to the embers that kept on burning throughout communism, throughout the decades of communism. That was in no small part due to the efforts of the previous Rebbe, and then, of course, our Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who continued his father-in-law's legacy and his father-in-law's mission, even though he was Rebbe in New York, but he always maintained the contacts and the network in the former Soviet Union. So, anyway, so bottom line is, today is, in Chabad, today is a holiday. It's a celebration. And I think it's interesting that on a day of liberation, it kind of coincides with a weekend or a day, yesterday, a day of independence for the United States of America. I guess the theme is getting out of where you're stuck. Oh, hey Riva, how's it going? Getting out of the places that you're stuck and getting to that place of freedom. That's where we all need to be. Okay, which really brings me to today's topic, and that is the notion of being misunderstood. So the truly great visionaries, the truly great thinkers, the truly great minds are usually ahead of their time, right? Think about, the greatest composers of music and the greatest artists. Many of them, during their lifetime, were completely not appreciated, right? Because the world then couldn't relate. People couldn't relate to their genius. It took a while for society, for humanity to catch up to the incredible vision. That's the way, that's the life, if you will. That's the fate of a true visionary. A true visionary usually doesn't have their work fully appreciated by those around them because of the fact that they're a visionary. In other words, if you create on the level of the people, right? So you're not envisioning or creating something that's past where people can already see. If you're speaking to where people are, then you'll be embraced, and then there'll be a lot of accolades. So there's going to be a lot of covet, a lot of honor. But if you're ahead, if you're leading in a visionary way, if you're leading from ahead, then the flip side of that. So the benefit of that is that you're ahead of your time. The negative part is, the downside is, you're ahead of your time, and therefore you're probably not going to be appreciated. So when Moses is thinking about his own mortality, when Moses is thinking about his own passing, and how God has told him that he is not going to lead the Jewish people into the promised land, the one goal that he's been working for the last 4 decades, shepherding his people, ushering his people into the promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob centuries prior, when he is told by God, you're not going to go in, that one dream that you have will remain unfulfilled because you're going to pass away on the other side of the Jordan. So when Moses hears those words, oh hey Riva, how's it going? Okay, here, sit aside for a second. So when Moses hears those words, Moses begins pleading with God. And Moses says to God, please appoint the leader that will take them, that will lead them, that will go before them, that will bring them. He uses different terminology. And there's such beautiful commentaries explaining how every nuance of Moses' request to God about appointing a good leader to take him over. Oh, I should have clarified. Basically, Moses was asking for a good next generation leader. In other words, he wanted a good leader to follow him to lead the people. It would be a shame for all of the progress made to have that all end because everything falls apart. So Moses basically asks for God to appoint a good leader. And God does. God appoints Joshua. That's the end of the story. But the way that Moses describes the quality of a leader is very, very telling. And 2 things that I want to point out. He talks about the leader going before them, and the leader also carrying them or bringing them. And as the commentaries point out, these are 2 different things. A leader going before them means a leader with a vision. That means someone that has a vision that's ahead of the people. But the notion of a leader who's going to bring them means that the leader, even with the vision, has the ability to articulate it, to inspire, and to move people along with that vision. And that's very important. You see, hey Reeves, you see, on the one hand, you could have a leader that has a tremendous vision, but can't inspire, can't implement, can't bring people on board. Why? Because it's too visionary. And then you can have a leader that doesn't have a big vision, but is very relatable. Moses asks for the best of both worlds. He asks for a leader who is a leader that can go in front of them, and a leader who can be sure to inspire the people to walk along that path. You see, because it's very easy to get ahead of the people and to get so far ahead that when you turn back, there's no one following you. So the key is to lead the way, but also almost to lead from the front, but also to lead from behind as well. Right? And whenever you're one second, ask your brother to help you. Whenever you have a bunch of kids, if you're a counselor in camp or a teacher in school and taking the kids on a field trip, you always have to have a teacher in the front of the line and a teacher in the back of the line. Because, first of all, because you can't let the kids decide where to go. I mean, you could, but if you have a destination in mind, look, a progressive way is to allow the kids to go where they want, fine. But if you have if you have to get them back at the end of the day for the parents to pick up, let's just say. Okay, so you need them back, 3 p.m. is the pickup time, camp is over, school is over, whatever. Okay, so you need someone in front of the line to direct traffic. But at the same time, you can't just have someone at the beginning of the line, because what happens with the folks all the way at the end? They might get distracted, might not know where they're going, so you have to have somebody behind at the back of the line. And so we have the same duality when it comes to leadership. That leadership needs to be from the front, but it also needs to be from the back. You have to have a visionary to set the vision that's ahead of the people. At the same time, you have to have someone, a leader, who's able to inspire everyone, no exception, even the stragglers, right? Even the ones at the back of the line, to inspire them to walk that path toward that vision. And very often those are two different people. I don't only mean in the physical example of, shepherding the kids back to, back on campus. What I mean is within leadership. These are typically two different types of personas. There are the leaders that are true visionaries, that are way ahead of their time, and sometimes we think of them as a bit eccentric or out of touch, and they're like way out there. And then you have leaders that are more like cheerleaders, right, or inspirers. They're motivating leaders, motivational leaders. They get people excited, people inspired and motivated, which is a very important thing. But they're not necessarily setting a vision that is truly revolutionary. It's the rare individual that possesses both abilities, the ability to truly have a vision worthy of the word vision, and also to inspire and to be able to move people along that path, move everyone along that path toward that vision. That's truly remarkable. And so what Moses asks God is to appoint a leader that has both of these qualities, that has the ability to have the vision and the ability to inspire the every person along that path toward that vision. In Kabbalistic terminology, these abilities or these qualities occupy two different parts of the soul, or they represent two different soul powers. So, and this is a topic that we've discussed many times. Even recently, a few weeks ago, we discussed along these lines, although today we're going to go much deeper and expand this idea. But as far as the basics, hopefully you have a frame of reference for what I'm about to say. So in Kabbalah, we refer to the vision and the power of having vision and the visionary as the one who is filled with the power of Chachma. Chachma is vision. Now, you might see the Hebrew word Chachma and see it translated as wisdom. And that's fine, I guess, but that's really not what Chachma is. Chachma is not wisdom, it's really vision. It's creativity, it's a vision, it's seeing something beyond what everyone else sees. That's what vision really means in this context. Vision doesn't mean that you're seeing what everyone else sees. That's not called vision. You talk about somebody, say, that person, they have vision. If what you mean is that they're able to see what everyone else sees, then what are you saying about them, right? When you say that someone has vision, what you mean is that they can see things that others cannot yet see. Or as our sages say in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, Eizahu Chacham, who is wise, again Chacham, or more accurately in today's context, who is a visionary? Haro'eh et hanolad. He or she, the one who sees what is yet to be born. You know what that means? The visionary is somebody who could see what is not yet in front of us. To see what's already here doesn't take vision. It just takes eyesight. Or it just takes, right? It just takes looking around and seeing what is already. A true visionary is not someone who sees what is, but someone who sees what could be. The possibilities that could exist. Or the impossibilities that could be made possible. That's what a true visionary is. That's what a true artistic mind is. Someone who can see that which is not already present. So, if you can see what's already here, that's a great start. Mazel tov. That's a great first step. So you're aware of what's going on. Great. That's also a good thing. But if you can see something that's not yet here, if you can visualize that, if you can see it, and you can feel it, and you can taste it, and you can dream it, and you can make it, then you're a visionary. Well, let's hold off on the making it, because that's already implementation. But if you can see it when it's not here, that's what constitutes, that's what makes you a visionary. And that's what Chachma is. Chachma is being a visionary. The Hebrew word Chachma, which is translated typically as wisdom, really means vision. The ability to see what's not physically discernible. It's a spiritual intuition or an intellectual intuition. It's an intuition. It's a vision of that which is not manifest currently in physical form or even maybe conceptual form, but it's the ability to see that in a manner of clarity. The example that's typically given in Kabbalah is the Barak HaMavrek, which is the lightning bolt that flashes through the night sky. So imagine famous, I say famous because I've said it hundreds of times in various classes, but it's in Kabbalah, it's a very well-known analogy that's given. Imagine you're walking along a foreign city, and the streets are dark, and it's at night, and you don't know where you're going. No lights. Let's say you wander into an alleyway, a street, a road, whatever, and suddenly either the lights go out or there are no lights whatsoever. You're alone, and it's dark, and you can't see anything. Great job. Soon. So imagine you're there walking along and you can't see anything. And then suddenly, there's the Barak HaMavrek, the lightning bolt, flashing through the sky. And for a moment, everything around you illuminates. It's such a powerful lightning bolt, flash of lightning, that everything illuminates. Almost like midday, like the noontime sun. Everything illuminates for a split second. And then, as quickly as it illuminated, it becomes dark once again, and you can no longer see anything. Plunged into darkness. This is the experience the Kabbalists teach. This is the experience of gaining that insight, gaining that vision, gaining Chachma. Chachma feels like a sudden flash of intuition, a sudden flash of vision that you didn't have before and you didn't expect, and suddenly it comes to you. suddenly out of nowhere, and you can't necessarily trace it, but out of nowhere, suddenly you're able to see everything so clearly. We call this an epiphany. We call this a moment of clarity. We call this in comic books and in cartoons the light bulb going off, right? Depicted as a light bulb going off. It's that moment of intuition. But understand this, that this is all the power of Chachma. Chachma is when those doors open up, those sliding doors open up and reveal the light beyond what we can normally see, to give us a glimpse of something truly phenomenal, and then we resume our normal activities. That's what gives us the flash and the intuition of insight, what we call the vision of being a visionary. So this is what Chachma is. Chachma is vision. Being a Chacham, typically translated as a wise person, doesn't really mean wise. It means being a visionary. Seeing something that others can't see because something has opened up for you and you've seen it. What the Kabbalists focus on, and this will be the focus of today's session, is the delicate process by which a human being who's been granted a vision, the process by which they themselves process the vision, articulate the vision to themselves, and then further share it with others. Because that is a very delicate process. For anyone that's ever had a moment of, aha, I just got it, that moment of aha, the aha moment, if you've ever had that, so you know how fleeting that moment can be and how delicate that experience is. Because just as quickly as you got that moment, that split second, that flash of insight, aha, I got it. If you get distracted, if you take your focus off, if you take your attention away, a moment later, that aha moment is gone, that sensation is gone, and the insight could be lost forever. So one thing is clear, and that is that the experience of Chachma is a very delicate one. And because it's delicate not just vis-a-vis, it's delicate all around because it's so subtle, it's so refined, it's so spiritual, that insight. Therefore, that's where a lot of misunderstanding comes in. Misunderstanding for oneself and misunderstanding vis-a-vis others as well. Have you ever had an experience where you had an idea in your mind and you were trying to explain it to someone else and they weren't getting it? Ever happened to you? Yeah, I would imagine it's happened to you. You ever have an experience where you're feeling something and you're trying to explain the feeling and the other person's just not getting it? Ever happen? Yeah, it happens. So what's at the core? Why is that? Where does misunderstanding come from? So the way Kabbalah describes misunderstanding is really that it's a product of the experience or the sensation, whether it's an idea or an emotion, existing within the one who has it on such a high, subtle, refined, hidden level that they don't have the tools to properly express it to others. Because the expression requires a concretizing, requires a coarsening of the idea to make it tangible, to put handles on it almost so the other person can grasp it, again conceptually, which means to shape it and give it contour and almost to move it out of its original pristine form. In other words, the purer the idea, the purer the emotion, the less accessible it is to others, and the more misunderstood it will be to others. The lower the idea or the feeling, when I say lower, what I mean is the more processed it is, the more coarsened it is, the more concretized it is, the more shaped it is, the more limited it is, the more accessible it is to others. So, here's a rule of thumb. The other person can only access something pretty tangible. If it's still ethereal, if it's still sublime, they won't be able to access it, typically, unless they're operating with a different set of senses than the normative senses. But if they're operating through the normative senses, right, what they can see, what they can hear, what they can understand, what they can feel, like the normative operation. If something is existing within you on a very lofty level, it will be misunderstood by the other. So, when we are frustrated by misunderstanding, trying to communicate, trying to share feelings, share ideas, I think this happens mostly with feelings oftentimes in relationships. The other person's not really getting it. It's really, and this is a truth in general in Kabbalah, it's really the mashpia's job, not the makabel. Let me explain those words. Mashpia means the giver, makabel is the receiver. Really the responsibility lies with the one who's doing the transmitting, not the one who's doing the receiving. Because if the recipient is not receiving, it's usually a problem with the deliverer, right? If you don't get your package that you ordered, right, you're going to call up UPS and say, hello, I've been waiting here all day and I haven't received the package, or FedEx, etc., right? Like I'm ready to receive, but it's not coming to me. The same thing is true when it comes to ideas and emotions. Again, your mileage may vary, and it could be the other person's not open to it or whatever. Okay, but as the giver, as the one who is sharing or teaching or revealing or whatever it is, communicating, it's your job, it's my job, it's your job, it's our job to do an effective job in taking whatever thing it is that we're thinking or feeling, bring it down, make it tangible, make it graspable and applicable and resonant to the recipient, and then delivered in a way that is understandable. That is really the sole job of the one who is doing the communicating, is to take the ideas, the feelings, to bring them down and to deliver them in a way that is receivable. That's the entirety of communication, which is why communication is so fraught with difficulty. Because so often people just speak where they're at. And where they're at is seeing something, thinking something, feeling something that has not yet been processed and has not yet been brought down, so to speak, to the level of that recipient. But we'd be forgiven for thinking that the other person can understand how we feel or think on our own level just because that's how we feel it or that's how we think it. Kabbalah reminds us that it's not so simple. We have to understand the process about how things work and how things are understood. And the more you understand the process, the more you can master the process and effectively work the process to effectively communicate. So if you don't know how people think or how we think within ourselves, then it's going to be hard to effectively transmit thinking or ideas to others. The more you know, the more you can share. So let's talk about how it works within us, which will necessarily help guide us as to how we relate to others. Sandy, I see your square turn green, which tells me that you wanted to share something. Go ahead.
I have a question. So it seems that what you're talking about is very much in parallel to as we think about the world. So from the spiritual to the animal, or the where we are, the sort of. I'm sorry, I've lost the references. But it seems like you've just described the same thing in that that what exists in the spiritual realm is then concretized in a way so that we, at a very animal level, can understand that.
Exactly.
Is that a parallel that you would?
Yes, 100%. Because the world of Atzilut, which is the world of emanation, the highest world, could also be termed the world of vision, right? And then we have the world of creation, then the world of formation, and the world of action, right?
Yeah.
So it all begins with a vision. Before you create, you have the vision. I think we combine creativity and vision together, but the truth is, the vision precedes the creation. Because otherwise, what are you creating? Right? And even if you're creating with a flow, there's still a vision that's one step ahead that's guiding your creativity, that's guiding your creation. So if you're painting, right? Creating music, dance, whatever form of expression that you're doing, right? So either you've set your vision, and now you're creating toward that vision, or you're creating in the moment, right? With your vision, but really your vision is always guiding you one step ahead. It's a powerful thing. And by the way, sometimes people think that, well, I'm not, a person might say, I'm not creative, or I'm not a visionary, I'm not this, I'm not that. Everyone has the ability and the power of Chachma in their soul. That's another beautiful outcome, if you will, of the Kabbalistic soul map, right? We have 10 powers of the soul. And what does that mean? All of us have all 10 powers of the soul. So don't tell me that you're not creative, you don't have a vision. Of course you do. Now, some people, of course, are more intuitively connected with that power of their soul, just like all the powers of the soul. But everyone has that ability and that potential. It's just about learning. For some it comes natural, but some have to learn how to kind of push away what already is to imagine what could be, to step into that space. And I don't have to tell you, there are many workshops, and I'm not talking even from a Jewish or Kabbalistic perspective. There are many contexts within which people can put themselves, creative thinking contexts, or what, I'm sure that's not like the branded name, but where you put yourself in that and you clear out stuff and you're able to tap into that reservoir of creativity. The bottom line is we all have that creative, more than creative, the visionary potential. We have it because we all have Chachma in our souls. We all have it. In fact, that's the very first of the soul powers. If you didn't have that, you couldn't have the others because they all unfold from Chachma. Literally, you couldn't have anything else. The soul wouldn't exist. The soul is comprised of 10 soul powers, the first of which is Chachma. So everyone has this vision. Everyone has the ability to be a visionary. Spiritually, physically, whatever it is. We all have that power. We have to learn how to tap into it. It's fine. Some people are more naturally intuitive with that. Some people are less. Okay, it just means you have to work a little bit harder and to figure out how to get there. But we all have that ability. So what's the point? The point is, as Sandy rightly points out, this process of having a vision and then articulating it to self and then to others absolutely parallels what goes on in the cosmic realms, in the spiritual realms of existence. Any process, this is the rule of thumb, any process that exists in here within us, right, exists also up there. And it's not in here, up there. It's not two separate spaces. So forgive me for the crude kind of like spatial terminology, but nonetheless, that's how we think. So I'm speaking the way we think. The bottom line is, whatever exists within the microcosm exists within the macrocosm. So this process of the vision and then articulation, etc., exists absolutely in the macrocosm. But today we're going to discuss very specifically 2 dimensions of Chachma itself, which is very rare, I would say, because usually Chachma is understood, it's kind of explained one way, and just put out there as, okay, this is what Chachma is. Today we're going to really split it and really get deep inside the process of having a vision. So again, here's the objective. Before you can share the vision with someone else, you have to know the vision. And to know the vision, you have to have Chachma. To have Chachma is today's conversation. But I just want to explain that this is at the heart and at the soul, at the core of being misunderstood. Being misunderstood is typically coming down to the fact that we don't have it clear by us. If you had something absolutely clear, then typically you can transmit that. I want to share with you one more thing before we jump inside the text. This is chapter 22. Yeah, we're going to be starting chapter 22 today. But before we get there, I want to share with you one more thing. It says King Solomon was able to give 3,000 parables, 3,000 examples, parables for a concept. And the Kabbalists ask, so what? He was a great storyteller. How is that? How is that a mark of his genius, of his wisdom? And the explanation is, it's not that he was giving 3,000 parallel parables, but he was giving 3,000 parables that successively, I think that's the word, brought the idea down lower and lower and lower and lower, 3,000 steps from the original vision of the idea. In other words, he could articulate an idea that began in a very abstract, visionary way, and he could bring it down level by level by level by level to then explain it to a young child, that the young child could get the vision. Which tells us something really important. If you can't explain your vision to a 5-year-old, then on some level, you don't understand the vision. If you can't explain the vision to a 5-year-old, that means that on some level, you don't understand the vision fully. Because if you really fully understood it, you could even explain at least a part of it, the essence of it. You could explain it to a child. Which is the power of Rashi, as the Rebbe often explained. Rashi's commentary, he writes, this is based on Pirkei Avot. I'll share something interesting with you. It says in Ethics of Our Fathers, actually, okay, I'm going to share a few things. So every Shabbat during the summer, there's a custom, a Jewish custom, to study one of the 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. 6 chapters, all dealing with personal ethics. It's not the law. It's not like, don't steal, don't defraud people. That we know. That's the law. The law is the law. That's obvious. Pirkei Avot, ethics, is beyond the letter of the law. It's not just give tzedakah, but give tzedakah with charity, but give it with a happy face, right? It's a different set of teachings. It's morals, ethics, values, Jewish values. It's really powerful. So yesterday, and you go one, so you start right after Passover until Rosh Hashanah. So from Passover to Rosh Hashanah, which is a long time, you study Pirkei Avot. So throughout those months, and essentially, So you study one chapter a day, one chapter a week. So week 1, right after Passover, is chapter 1, and then chapter 2. So this past Shabbat, so yesterday, we studied chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about numbers. God created the world with 10 utterances, and God created 10 things miraculously right before Shabbat. All different numbers. There are 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and then from Noah to Abraham, another 10 generations. Talks about numbers. 4 different types of students, 4 different types of personalities, 4 different types of it's like it teaches using like numbers. At the end, the last Mishnah, the last teaching of the chapter, talks about life milestones. And it says, when a child is 5, they should begin studying Chumash, the Torah, the Bible. When they're 10, they should begin studying Mishnah. You know what, Mendel? Here, I'm going to read to you the original because it's really fascinating. So it says like this: at 5, you study Mikra, which is scripture. Ben Eser Shanim 10, Mishnah, which is the original form of the oral law and the laws of Torah, the orchard, like the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Mishnah. 13 years old is mitzvahs. That's bar mitzvah. That's when you become responsible to do the mitzvah. 15, Gemara. Gemara is the Talmud. 18, chuppah. You know what chuppah is? Marriage. Okay, listen. 18, a little young, but okay. It means that maybe someone's ready. 18, legal. All right. Next, 20, lirdaif, which means pursuit of a livelihood. 20, time to get a job. 30, koach, strength. 40, bina, understanding. 50, that's why it says, Kabbalah you shouldn't study until you're 40. That's where that comes from. 50, eitzah, giving advice. Don't give advice until you're 50. It means it's one thing to understand, but it's another to give advice. You have to be another decade to be able to give advice. 60 is zikna, which means like seasoned wisdom, like veteran wisdom. 70 is seva, it's ripe old age. 80 is gevura, 80 is strength. And then it goes on. Okay, tishim lashuach, it's translated there. And 100 kilu meis va'avra batam min ha'olam. And then 100, it's like you've passed away and you're gone from the world at 100. Which the Rebbe explains is not saying, it's not giving a death sentence, but it's saying on a deeper level that at 100, a person is no longer subject to the limitations of the physical world, no longer subject to temptations and other materialistic drives and desires. At 100, you're past that. You've seen it all. It's anyway. Halavai, if only we would all live into that stage with good health and be able to move past all the trappings of the world, so to speak. But the point that I wanted to share with you is the very first milestone, which is 5. It says at 5 years old, start studying Torah, start studying Chumash, the Bible. Great. Rashi in his commentary, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, Rabbi Shlomo the son of Yitzchak, the great medieval Jewish scholar and biblical and Talmudic commentary. Rashi is like the greatest, most prolific commentary, Jewish commentary on both the Bible and the Talmud. So Rashi says in his introduction to his commentary on the Torah, he writes that I'm writing pshat, the simple explanation of the verses for the 5-year-old that's studying Chumash for the first time. That's what his objective is. That he's writing his commentary, not a mystical commentary, not basic explanation. If you want to know what a word means and it's a complicated or unusual word, he'll give you the translation. If there's a piece of the story that's a little bit unusual or doesn't make sense, a question comes up in the narrative, he addresses it. And he famously writes very short. He doesn't even write the questions, he just writes the explanations that you have to figure out what he was asking, what you would have asked that this answers. It's a really beautiful way of exploring his commentary. But as the Rebbe pointed out many times, Rashi's commentary contains secretly some of the greatest mystical teachings embedded in the basic, simple explanation for the 5-year-old. You don't have to be 5 to study Rashi, but it means from 5 you're already ready to study Chumash Rashi, the Torah with Rashi's commentary. Embedded in that commentary are some of the greatest secrets. As the Rebbe would often say, after the Rebbe's mother passed away, in her honor, the Rebbe would deliver every Shabbat, or every time he fabranged, he would deliver a Rashi Sicha, which means a talk on Rashi. He would quote a verse, he would quote the Rashi, he would begin to eviscerate Rashi, cut it, totally rip the Rashi. Like, what is Rashi saying? What is he thinking? Is it an obvious? Ask upwards of even a dozen questions or more on a single Rashi's commentary, and proceed to reconstruct it in a way that is mind-bogglingly deep. And the Rebbe would often end those talks by saying, Miyayna shel Rashi, from the wine of Rashi, which is an allusion. Rashi owned a vineyard. One of his day jobs was that he owned a vineyard. Rashi lived in France, so Rashi owned a vineyard. In fact, today there's a kosher wine called Rashi wine. It may not be the greatest quality wine, whatever. All right, there's a wine called Rashi wine, but the Rebbe would say that wine is yayin. The Hebrew word for wine Yayin is the numerology of that is 70, which is the same numerology as Sod, which means secret. In Hebrew, they both equal 70. Yud Yud Nun, 10, 10, and 50 is 70. Sod is 6, Samach Vav Dalet, 66 and 4, which is 70 also. So the Talmud says, Nichnas Yayin Yatza Sod. When you take in wine, the secrets come out. Right? As you may have experienced at some point in time, right? Person drinks a little bit, and out come, the secrets. So what's the point? The Rebbe would often explain the Kabbalah secretly embedded in Rashi's commentary. You know what that means for me? What it means for me is that Rashi was able to take the deepest secrets of Kabbalah and embed them in a commentary that works for a 5-year-old. So that's a la Solomon, right? Solomon with his 3,000 parables, taking an idea down, 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 down. It's phenomenal. It's incredible. It's not just 3,000 parallel parables. It's 3,000 parables that successively go down, 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 down to explain it even to a young child. And like I said before, there's the positive way of looking at it. I don't mean good or bad, but there's also the flip side. If you can't explain it to the 5-year-old, then the question is, do you really understand it yourself? If you can't explain it to a child in a very simple, basic way, how well do you really understand it? And I don't mean to use the same terminology that you have for you, the way you understand it, because that's the whole point of this is 3,000 parables mean you're using different terminology. You're putting it into different packaging, into different case that works on that level that's lower, 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 lower. So the point is not to keep it in the same thing. How can I explain quantum physics to a 5-year-old? Does that mean I don't understand it? If you really understand quantum physics, you can take a concept and find a way to explain it to a 5-year-old. If you really understand it, if you really understand the heart and soul of it, at the core, we'll be able to explain it. So not oftentimes, if we are misunderstood, getting back to vision and misunderstanding, if we are understood, if our vision is ahead of someone else, and they're not getting it, they're not catching up, they don't get how I think, they don't get how I feel. So Kabbalah encourages us to look inside and to dissect our own process of Hoffman and Bina and ask ourselves the question, how well do we understand our vision? Because if we understand it really well, we'll likely be able to explain it to someone else. If we're not explaining it to someone else, it means there's some sort of lacking in the way we truly understand it ourselves, which makes sense because a vision is higher than understanding, which we'll get into today. So that's some of the mechanics of today's conversation. Let's jump in. And before we jump in, any questions, comments, anecdotes, parables?
Rabbi Ari.
Yes.
Is it possible that you could understand on a high level but not be able to... I hear what you're saying. I basically agree, but I just had this thought. Understand on a high level but not necessarily be able to articulate it? Or
yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, exactly, yes, 100%. In fact, you can see it on a high level, and it can be so clear and obvious to you, but you can't express it, you can't articulate it, and it's because it's stuck on the level of vision of Chachma and is not coming down to the lower places within oneself. So it's not a flaw on the level where it's at, but it means that it's not coming down to a lower dimension, and that's exactly the process that we're going to speak about today. So I think the more we understand the process of how things move down the chain, if you will, it can help us exercise that and get to a place where we're not finding ourselves stuck on that level and being frustrated that others can't get it, they don't get it, they don't see what I'm seeing. And I think if that frustration is a healthy frustration on the one hand, because it means that we are thinking ahead of where things are. At the same time, as Moses taught us, a leader, right, has to have both qualities. You have to have the vision that's ahead, but also be able to lift everyone else up to get there. to boost everyone to get on board with that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's jump in now.
Yeah, I think if you don't have it in your kishkas, then you can't really articulate.
I would agree with that.
Right?
I would agree with that. Yes. Hold on one second. Let me get this on full display for all y'all. Share my screen. Okay. Chapter 22. Of course, as you know by now, this will be using Kabbalistic terminology. I will translate everything. But more than just the words, some words that need translation, the concepts are also written in a very mystical way. So I encourage, no, that's not what I want to do. So I encourage you to use the ideas that I've shared with you thus far in today's session, to lean on them to understand the concepts that are being taught here. Because the goal is that these should not remain theoretical, but rather practical and really inform us. Okay, chapter 22. We're talking about the letter Yud because we talked about it last week and in our last few sessions. The letter Yud, actually mainly last week, the letter Yud is the smallest of the Hebrew letters. And it's almost like a single point. It has the least definition of any of the other letters. All the other letters have length and width to it. It's like broader strokes of the pen when you write, you form those letters. The Yud, it's almost a dot. A little bit longer than a dot, but almost just a dot. So the Yud represents a dimension of vision, intellectual vision, where, we said last week, the Yud is the stage where you have a concept in your head, but you know that you can't share it as is because it's too big, it's too broad. So you wipe away the concept, you clear it away, and in the absence, then you crystallize. Okay, what's the point? What's the core idea here? What's the absolute point of this big idea that I had? When you've settled on the point, that's what we call the Yud. So it's considered to be a concealment relative to the big vision that you had before, but it's likewise a concealment to the way you're going to share it subsequently to the other. So it's that middle point, that's literally a point, or figuratively a point, I guess, between the way you understand and the way they'll understand it. You have that Yud in the middle. How do we reveal the point? How does the point of the Yud become revealed in the next step to the recipient, or to the next step down? So here we have two stages of revelation. So let's begin. The point of the Yud goes through two stages of revelation. In the first, the point is contracted and concealed within itself, and cannot even be a direct source for the length or breadth necessary for the intellectual capacity of the recipients. In other words, let me step outside the text for a second. The first stage of the Yud, the vision is it's still so deep and so hidden that it cannot be a direct source for that which will be revealed to the recipient. Take a look at how he articulates it as we continue inside. The revelation at this stage, revelation of course means revelation of insight, the wisdom, the vision. So the revelation at this stage is an undeveloped point which flashes in one's mind and is not crystallized into letters or words, which would enable it to be grasped and understood in its length and breadth. In other words, what is the Yud stage? Again, the Yud equals point. right? So Yod, small letter, point, undefined, stroke of the pen. So what's the first stage of the Yod? What's the first stage of the point? It's where the point is so, I don't know what the right word is. I would say abstract, but that's not the word that he uses here. Undeveloped, or not crystallized, not defined. It's so undefined. Yeah, I think undefined works here. It's so undeveloped and undefined that it will not be understood by anyone else. And it cannot be expanded at this point into something that could then be understood by anyone else. It's so abstract, undeveloped, ethereal, undefined, that it's not concretized at all. It's not crystallized at all, even within one's own mind, let alone to be shared within someone else. So he gives now an example. So let's read the example inside. We can see this more clearly through an analogy from common experience. So now he gives a human example, what we might call a parable, to take an abstract concept and bring it down to us, kind of modeling the very concept that we're talking about. We can see this more clearly through an analogy from common experience. In a man of great intellectual power, there constantly well forth original and profound insights. Okay. So I'm looking at the Hebrew to see the translation, to see the accuracy of the translation. Okay, so we're talking about a person, right? Non-gender specific, but a person of great intellectual power, specifically one within which constantly well forth original and profound insights. That's the key here. Original and profound insights. We would call these visionary insights. This is Chachma. We're talking about the power of Chachma, the power of not just, unoriginal thoughts. No, these are original thoughts, creative ideas, visionary ideas. So this person has an abundance of Chachma, and they're constantly being filled with these very creative, very, ahead of its time ideas, visionary ideas. Let's continue inside. Yet, he cannot reveal or explain them in a way which would enable others to truly grasp them. So, I'm going back. We have a person here who is constantly filled with original and profound insights, and yet is stuck. Why is he stuck or she stuck? Because the person cannot reveal or explain to anyone else. This is what I meant by, being misunderstood. You try to explain it, and it's not working. It's so ahead of its time, people don't get it. Let's continue inside. For although, as far as he is concerned, a particular idea shines overtly, so for the person themselves, they got it. It's clear. It's shining. Still, it is not settled within his brain. Look at that line. You can see it, but it's not settled. So even the visionary at this stage, although there's a certain clarity, the idea is shining in a real way, but it's not settled. There's a difference between shining, the idea shining, and the idea being settled. The vision shines, but the idea is not yet settled. And if it's not yet settled, guess what? You cannot explain it, transmit it to someone else. If it's not settled in your own mind, if it's something you just sense, you're not going to be able to convey it. Rather, at this stage, obviously, we're talking about a certain stage of having vision. Rather, it hovers like an elusive lightning flash. I love that that imagery. I told you before, the lightning flash is always synonymous with Chachma, which is what we're talking about, having the vision. But it's not just the lightning flash that illuminates, like I said before. It's it's hovering like an elusive lightning flash. Like it's shining, but you can't. It's not settled. It's like shining here, shining there. The matter is not defined and visualized in the form of a well-defined point. Again, we're talking about the first stage of Chachma, the higher stage, if you will, of having a vision. It's not yet defined. It's shining by you, but it's not yet defined. And it's not visualized as a well-defined point. It's shining like an undefined flash of lightning, but it's not defined and visualized as a well-defined point. Now, for himself, this is sufficient, right? Let's say it's you. For you, it's thrilling. You have these ideas, you have this vision. It's not settled, it's not defined, but for you, it's thrilling. It's breathless. It takes your breath away. It's shining. It's so many different possibilities. It's incredible. So for himself, this is sufficient. He knows the concept with his own intellect, and relative to himself, it may be considered revealed. For you, we can call it a revealed idea. For you, you have your vision. But the concept cannot be revealed to others unless it takes the form of a well-defined point which can be grasped. For you, you can indulge in your vision experience. It's wonderful, it's thrilling, it's breathtaking, it's uplifting, all of the above. And for you, there's clarity on some level. It's shining, but it's not settled. It's not fully settled. It's not defined yet, even within yourself. And because it's not defined to you, you cannot reveal it to others. If at this stage you try to share this vision try to share it with someone else, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to make any sense. It's going to take on maybe it's going to be misunderstood. It's going to take on maybe an incorrect form because you haven't yet formed it for yourself. I want to check in with all of you. Let me stop sharing for a second. Does this make sense so far, what we're saying? Yes? How you can have a vision that's so clear, but it's still so, in a sense, abstract. It's not yet clarified. Because of that, you won't be able to articulate it. Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Incredible.
perfect.
Incredible.
Perfect,
Yeah,
perfect.
I understand a lot.
Good. And it's something maybe we can relate to on that initial stage.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that's almost, it's a feeling more. It hasn't even come
Yes.
to a place of an image, but it's a feeling of, I get it, I see it, but you're not seeing anything, and there's no words to go along with that.
And I think there's like it's all gray, right? So there's no, it's almost like it's a very smooth progression of combined of like multiple frames, right? So it's moving, it moves into becoming more visualized and more concretized. But there is a stage, a definitive stage of this vision where by you it feels exciting. And it feels like you're onto something, like you've got something here. But it's not yet settled. It's not yet clarified even for you. And I think the first point of that is a feeling. I think the first point of that is like what you're saying. It's a sensation that something happened. You're not even sure what it is yet. A later stage is you know that you got something, but you don't yet know and it progresses little by little, and you get it more and more. But you could still have a stage before it's fully articulated, not even fully, before it's articulated even for yourself. We're going to continue inside because he does a parentheses for a while, and you'll see that in a moment. And in the parentheses, he discusses how what we're talking about here the predefined state of the Yud and the post-defined state of the Yud is not Chachma and Bina. These are two stages within Chachma itself. And he wants to make sure to clarify that, the distinction between Chachma and Bina on this level of vision. So let's get back inside and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to share my screen with you one more time and let's continue inside. Okay, parentheses. We refer here to grasping. Okay, look at the last line, right over here. Let's get a running start into this parentheses. But the concept cannot be revealed to others until it takes the form of a well-defined point which can be grasped. He wants to clarify that this point which can be grasped is not Bina. It's still Chachma, but there's a level of Chachma where it's a defined point that can be grasped. So we refer here to grasping of the kind that is possible in Chachma, which differs from grasping in relation to Bina. So let's explain. To grasp a concept through Bina is to understand it in all its details, each detail being individually defined. So again, he's defining Bina as Bina is when you understand. Bina is the next intellectual power after Chachma. So Chachma and then Bina. Bina is not vision. Bina is not, being a visionary. Bina is understanding, but more than understanding, breaking something down into all of its details. So it's taking a concept and analyzing all of its details and all of its points, which means that you take a single concept and you cut it into different pieces. You divide it into different segments, all in order to understand the totality better. So it's like taking a mathematical formula and breaking it down into its components. It's taking a logical formula and breaking it down into its components. It's taking anything and breaking it down into its details. So, to grasp a concept through Bina is to understand it in all of its details. Here's the key, each detail being individually defined. So each detail has its own definition. That's Bina. The grasp of Chachma, when he said before you can grasp something in Chachma, the grasp of Chachma, on the other hand, encompasses the entire concept as one comprehensive point. In other words, not split yet into the details, it's still understanding something as a single point. Accordingly, the light of Chachma is more intense. For as explained elsewhere, when the many particulars of a concept are revealed, the light is obscured. The moment you take a point and you break it down, the light of the idea is hidden. Whereas when it still exists only as a point, the subtle light of the idea shines within it. If you're, it's the way it is. You have an idea.